Hello, In Her Image family. It's Jessica Woodbury here. I know you haven't heard from me in a while as Meg has been doing her wonderful series. In the last episode on polygamy, I loved Meg and Jocelyn's discussion of the scriptures around polygamy. Like them, I also do not believe that polygamy is of God. This topic is a hard and important one for many. And after that episode, I wanted to jump in and share a few additional thoughts and direct you to a few resources in case they're helpful to any of our listeners. To start, I want to say that this podcast is obviously quite focused on the feminine. We care deeply about bringing greater balance and wholeness to ourselves, our worship, and the world by focusing on and illuminating the often hidden, ignored, doubted, dismissed, or forgotten feminine half of the divine. And just as we care deeply about honoring this feminine half of God, we also care deeply about honoring female voices and stories in a world that often privileges and prioritizes male voices, male stories, and men and their testimony over the word and testimony of women. Along this vein, I wanted to encourage anyone who is researching or engaging in the conversation of Joseph Smith's polygamy to really give priority to the often hidden, ignored, doubted, dismissed, or forgotten words of the women involved. There are so many places where you can find the words of these women if you know where to look. In my personal research on this topic, I have been able to read the direct accounts of at least 18 women who claimed to have been in a polygamous marriage with Joseph during his lifetime. I've read their words in the form of affidavits, personal recollections and letters, journals, life sketches for their posterity, interviews for news articles or books, court testimonies, and minutes from speeches. Some of their words are dry and factual, while some of their private personal writings and letters to loved ones describe rich emotional details, like the anguish they experienced as they learned of the doctrine and were asked to make this decision, the fear and heavy burden they felt from the extreme secrecy they were sworn to, and the suffering, worry, and humiliation that accompanied their polygamous marriage to Joseph in that early time. I will admit, although I wish I didn't find this there as well, they also often share strongly worded testimonies of plural marriage, as well as spiritual experiences that convinced them that this was the path they should take. But I hope that if you are listening to voices in this conversation of Joseph Smith's polygamy, that you will take special time to honor, read, and sit with these women's voices and stories, especially when shared in their own words. Two of the easiest places to find and read their stories are in Todd Compton's two books. His first, In Sacred Loneliness, which chapter by chapter focuses on the lives of 30 of Joseph Smith's most likely plural wives. And I would especially suggest immersing yourself in the second volume, called In Sacred Loneliness, The Documents. This primarily contains selections of the personal words of these women in the form of their letters, courtroom testimonies, autobiographies, and journal entries, etc. You can also chase trails for other source documents around these women by going to a number of different places, one of which may be a website like josephsmithpolygamy.org, which has short biographies on each of Joseph Smith's most agreed upon plural wives by historians. By scanning the list of evidence sources provided on each woman's individual page, you can find more possible personal affidavits and accounts to look up and read. There's another thing I would like to bring up as well. I know that there's currently a lot of discussion taking place about the topic of Joseph's polygamy in podcasts, YouTube channels, articles, and more. I think it's wonderful to listen to a variety of perspectives and have listened at least to some extent to the voices of those on the wide range of the spectrum of belief around Joseph's polygamy, trying to understand where each side is coming from and whether or not I'm missing something. But when it comes to historical arguments about whether or not something actually happened in the past, I highly encourage you to give the most weight to primary sources and to the perspectives of legitimate historians, whether those historians are from within the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints or without. If you are referred to a podcast, article, YouTube channel, etc., sharing historical interpretations of some kind, Do the work to find out who the individuals are authoring the articles, running the podcasts, sharing historical analyses as guests on those podcasts, and so forth. What is their professional background? Have they received legitimate training in historical analysis? Training in this field can be so important, as it includes understanding deeply the general time period that they're dealing with, knowing how to interpret irregularities in records, private testimony, historical accounts, etc., dealing with inconsistencies, and learning how to draw the most likely conclusions based on the whole of historical sources together. If these individuals are not trained historians, and from the research that I've done on the many that I've listened to, most are not, then can you find places where trained historians are responding to these other theories or to the same historical data? Also, do the arguments of the individuals speaking on these various platforms seem emotionally driven in some way? What seems to be their motivation for sharing this information? I hope that we can just all ask ourselves questions that can help us be thoughtful and intentional in our personal searches for understanding. I hope you will also pay attention to the way in which our own emotions and desires may be impacting our investigation into these topics. What is it that we are wanting and wishing to find? Why? If we are honest with ourselves, are our own desires, no matter which side we are leaning toward, impacting the way that we are looking at the evidence? And lastly, I can personally attest that there is a lot that can be triggering around this topic. My professional training is as a social worker, and so at times I can be particularly sensitive to things which can be triggers to some individuals that many others may not think about. When it comes to the speculations and discussion around Joseph's involvement with polygamy, one thing that can be triggering to many is the way this discussion can seem to follow this societal pattern of undermining and disbelieving a number of women's stories in the work to believe and salvage the reputation of one influential man. All you need to do is look at the recent news to see that we are still fighting a centuries-old battle against the systemic undermining of women's stories in order to uphold the reputation of a powerful man denying an action that he knows could ruin him. It continues to happen in politics, religion, business, the entertainment industry, and more. The speed at which many individuals move to cast doubt on a woman's sharing of her personal stories of trauma, whether that be by vilifying these women's character, accusing them of being dishonest or powerless pawns in a larger game of other men's power, and so forth, is predictable and discouraging. To women who have delved into these stories and accounts, and then hear certain elements of the conversation around Joseph and whether or not he was really involved, there are examples where it feels like they're watching the saints from long ago engage in these behaviors to undermine women's testimonies before polygamy became public. And it can also often feel like they're watching people today continuing to engage in these same behaviors, failing to believe women and intentionally casting doubt on their many testimonies in order to protect a man important to the psyches and spirits of many. Can we know for certain exactly what happened between Joseph and each of these women? No, we cannot. People can be drawn to believe different things when it comes to this time in history. But if we are immediately feeling drawn to disbelieve or undermine the testimonies given by these 18 women and many other individuals, all in order to believe Joseph's public testimony, I hope we will ask ourselves a lot of questions about why. Maybe there are good legitimate reasons. And also, are we following those societal patterns and being honest with ourselves, if possible? Sometimes it's hard and it's maybe impossible to actually differentiate why and where those thoughts are coming from. But again, I hope we can thoughtfully investigate the voices we are listening to, give priority to source documents, especially making sure we are honoring and spending time with the stories and words of women, and be careful in the way that we talk about this conversation as we become more aware of how our words may be reflecting a pattern of undermining women that can be triggering to many. Thank you to each of you for taking the time to be with us on this podcast. to sit with different ideas, to talk about difficult topics, to be open and honest. We feel so honored to be a part of providing what hopefully can be a safe platform to hear your and other stories and perspectives, and to provide a safe place to explore the beauty and mystery and the often silenced, overlooked feminine half of the divine, and to share each of our own unique experiences with that power. I look forward to joining you again soon with conversations that I promise will be a little less heavy and a lot more focused fully on the primary topic of this podcast, the joy of finding and experiencing our Mother God. And I wish you and yours the best until then.